Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. Mark DeJesus here. I am your brother from another mother, bringing you insights along the way. I'm all about mental, emotional, and relationship health, and if you are too, you have arrived at a great place. Today, I want to get into a subject that for everyone, as you're walking your healing and freedom journey, you're going to need to know and understand and practice the power of healthy relationship boundaries. Healthy people know how to practice loving, healthy, and empowering boundaries. This is a part of your healing and freedom journey. And it's going to be important that you understand how to live in it, because healthy boundaries help us to experience the best that's available in healthy relationships. Healthy relationships provide the best environment for us to heal and grow, and healthy relationships don't flourish unless there are healthy boundaries that are involved. And we're going to get into this. My plan is to do a 3-part series. We'll see how it breaks up. But this first part, I'm going to get into what is a relationship boundary and why do we need it. And the truth is, most of us know that boundaries are important, but so many of us, we have no idea how to practice healthy relationship boundaries. Our upbringings had so many violations of boundaries. Some of you had chaos growing up, or aspects of neglect, dysfunctional models that you were grown up with. And our upbringings don't give us the healthiest models. We didn't see it modeled well. And we weren't taught, we weren't encouraged how to practice it. So for many of you, when you look back at your family life and you take a sober understanding of what you were given and not given, it's no wonder we're confused. We confuse guilt with love. We fall into codependent patterns. We become people pleasers, and our gauge for what a healthy, loving relationship should look like, it's very distorted and downright confusing. And that's why many, as they work through mental health issues, they work through recovery, they work through addictions, they work through even practicing renewed patterns or reparenting and things like that, they're finding themselves looking around and saying, I need to develop some better boundaries in my life. If that's you, then you are the person I'm talking to. You're the person I want to encourage. And I really think we all need to know how to grow in healthier boundary patterns, to value them, but also learn how to practice them in effective ways. So I first want to get into what is a boundary, what's a relationship boundary. And you could look online, you can get all these things, but I want to give you a Mark DeJesus kind of treatment to this. I like to find ways to explain things in ways that are meaningful and give us an understanding of what we're looking at here. When I describe a relationship boundary, one term that I would use is it's a membrane. I'm going to get nerdy for just a second here. I'm referring to something you learned in biology, whether you fell asleep in that class or not. There was a biology class, college course I took that. I was early in the morning, so it was tough to feel awake during that class. But in biology, you learn about a cell wall, and that there's a membrane that surrounds it. And what that does, that membrane, is it allows certain things to cross the barrier. But yet at the same time, if it's working properly, there's many things it protects the interior of the cell from being invaded by in its healthy state. So it leaves things out, and then it allows certain things to enter in. And in relationships, that's really the ideal picture that I want to provide, is one of this membrane where it's not a rigidity, but it's also not a free-for-all. There's certain things that are allowed in, and that membrane gives a gentle relational picture. Another thing that we could use is in the terminology of boundaries, like a gate. It guards what's allowed in and not allowed in. And in this picture here, this isn't a fortress that we're looking at. It's just a fence. But that fence there lets you know here's the boundary. Many times it's a property boundary. And it's a way of reminder of this is the property boundary, either between two properties or a boundary within a property. And there's a gate there. And the gate lets you know that there is access. And that gate may have a lock to it. And you need to know and just have the right person or the right situation where you get access to the lock to get in. We could also look at boundaries as a strong wall, although I'm going to get into where this can work against us. But even with a wall being a boundary, it can be a healthy thing, provided there's a gate there. And the gate lets you know, oh, there is access in and out. There are certain situations where you're allowed in and certain situations where someone needs to get out, right? And so, but what I want to highlight the most, besides membrane, gate, wall, is relationship boundaries are what you allow into your heart space. And I want this message to be one of encouraging you. Your heart is precious. Your heart is your treasure. And the life of your heart is so important. In fact, the Bible speaks in Proverbs about guarding your heart because out of it is the wellspring of life. And boundaries are a part of that. It's a part of you honoring, respecting, valuing that space of your inner life. And so as I get into this, I'm going to show you some of the things that boundaries do in your life. The first one is boundaries set an appropriate limit. It sets appropriate limits of time, access, and help. These are three things I want to bring right off the top there. They remind you that you have limits. And you can only do so much. You only have so much time. You only have so much access that people can have to your life. There's only so much help you can bring. So a boundary says, okay, this is how much time I can give to something. Because a key boundary violation is misusing someone else's time. Two is access. When I say access, not everyone is meant to have access to your inner life, to your heart and your inner world. And people who don't have boundaries, they tend to let way too many people have way too much access to their inner heart life. It also communicates there's limits on the help that you bring. You're not called to help everyone all the time. And so this kind of sets the template of understanding I have limits. I'm a human being. I have limitations. And these limitations are reminders of my humanity. And it is okay to have those limits and to recognize them. Boundaries also set up actual physical parameters. Let's start off with that because it sets in place, for example, someone can't just physically show up whenever they want to. And that sets a communication that this is how things need to operate. I remember when I had an office in Connecticut, I had to put a sign up that said by appointment only because people would want to just show up and they wanted me to drop everything I was doing and just help them on the spot. I had meetings, I had schedules, I have people that I've given my responsibility to. And so that was an example of a boundary. Sometimes there were people that would still knock on the door anyways because my situation's super important. It recognizes that somebody is not understanding boundaries. I remember an interesting story because as I think about this physical boundary thing, even how we physically interact with each other is important to be aware of. There's certain things you wouldn't do if you've just met someone, for example. You wouldn't necessarily be as physically affectionate in a certain ways because you haven't gotten to know them, right? I remember there's an interesting moment in the Hollywood, celebrity world where Jerry Seinfeld, the famous comedian, he was giving an interview on a red carpet kind of thing, and a singer who was famous at the time, I don't know if she's still famous anymore, her name was Kesha, and she had a moment of seeing someone that she got so excited about it. And she went over in a love bombing kind of way, went over to him and said, "Hey, can I give you a hug?" And he very point blank looked at her and said, "No." And it was kind of an awkward interaction. And then as she went away, he's like, "Who was that?" And they told him, and he's like, I don't know. Maybe some people would say he was a little bit too curt or rude. But it does show that when someone establishes a boundary, sometimes it can feel intrusive or it can feel harsh, but it's also a reminder that, hey, we all want to respect each other in our boundaries, even physically, in how we're interacting with each other and showing that respect. Boundaries guard our relational investments. There's people you're investing energy into. There's people that you're giving of yourself to help. And I want to remind you all in your journey, who you help, who you give your energy to is your decision, because that's the power of love. True love gives you the ability to choose and to decide. And when you harness the power of decision, you're able to decide who you invest into and who you don't. Boundaries also, they honor your values. And this is what I mean by it. It helps you to have guardrails on what you morally participate in and follow your values and follow your sense of right and wrong. Conversations that maybe you say, I'm not participating in this. I don't like where this is going. I don't like the way people are going about this. Maybe you get into a conversation and it gets super gossipy, super judgy, super condemning. And I know condemning is not a word, but you find yourself going, maybe not in a harsh way, but maybe you're just trying to graciously go, this is not something I want to be a part of. And so it helps you live out of your values in healthy ways. Boundaries also help you uphold healthy interaction and communication, meaning how much you share. Because people without boundaries, they often struggle with too much oversharing, or how people talk to you and what you allow as far as respect and disrespect, how you allow people to pull from you. Because folks, there's a lot of users out there that will use and manipulate, monopolize your time because they are highly focused on themselves to the point that they don't see there's a person I also need to honor in their time, in their resources, and their help and their energy. Boundaries also help us to steward our resources. I only have so much, and you only have so much in time, in energy, in money, in possessions. And so boundaries help you to have a clarity on what you give out, what you lend out, what you do with what you possess, and how you share it, and where you exercise generosity, where you give money to, and what you don't give money to. In fact, I have many people who write to me, they're constantly driven by a sense of guilt. They don't have a sense of boundaries, of being able to say no to people financially. Because many times saying no to someone financially can be an act of love. For example, a parent who's saying, you know what, I can't keep enabling this or feeding this. And that's actually an act of love, but it's also a boundary that reflects that love. Number 7 is that boundaries, they protect that which is important for you to focus on. All of us have areas of our life that we are called to focus on. Meaning these are the things that are important, the relationships that are important, the investments that are important. When you establish boundaries, it now frees up your energy, it frees up your resources to now be able to focus better. And I've learned over my life, the more that I establish boundaries, the more it guards what's important for my day, for my schedule, and what I invest myself into. Because people without boundaries end up getting very angry at the world, angry at other people, angry with themselves, angry at life. They're exhausted because they haven't learned to establish, this is what I'm focusing on. This is what I'm giving my attention to. It's not only saying no to things, it's also having a strong yes. And I want to encourage you to have a strong yes in your life. This is what I'm investing in. This is where I'm going. This is where I'm stepping. And let that be something that you protect. And boundaries help us do that. Now, from a biblical perspective, I think our model is Jesus. When you watch his life, incredibly compassionate, showing and manifesting the truth and grace of our God, but he modeled healthy boundaries. You see that his boundaries oftentimes disrupted other people's expectations. I remember as a teenager, we had this saying, let's follow what would Jesus do? And it was a trend that went around, and we were, saying that a lot. But if we really think about it, a lot of things, when it comes down to what would Jesus do, there'd be a lot of times he would not feed someone's expectation. And crowds would want to pull him in, and he would disappear and go in the opposite direction. When there was a moment to, well, you could take this miracle and tell the whole town, he would say, nah, don't tell anybody. There are times where he would go against what somebody was thinking, hey, let's do this. Here's the next thing, Jesus, we should do. And he didn't necessarily go along with that. Sometimes just simply deciding that I'm not going to go in that direction can be a practice in boundary that's very, very effective. So, and getting back to this, what boundaries look like, I want to share with you two extremes in this, two unhealthy extremes, two ditches that we can get into. And when I do a lot of teaching, I often talk about the ditches that we can fall into. And some of us think that if we're in one ditch, we go into black and white thinking we're going to then end up going into the other ditch. And the way that I teach things, it's like, why do we have to live in the ditches? Why don't we actually drive on the road? So the goal is the healthy lane, but understanding the ditches can sometimes help our discernment and our awareness, and many of you will find yourself leaning towards one. The alignment of your car tends to drift towards one of these two. The first one is that you would say you have boundaries, but they're hard walls. They have no gates, no doors. And this is often people who've been hurt and wounded and have had very difficult experiences. So this is why I said earlier, where a wall can work against you if there isn't a gate, because the wall can become something that, yes, it keeps people out, but then it now imprisons you. And so many people are finding themselves self-protecting, but they're also imprisoning themselves. Someone with this kind of walls, but no gates or no doors, nothing can get in. They're in constant, intense self-protective mode. They have a lot of deep hurt and pain, but they kind of play the hard game in relationships. They avoid close relationships. They don't open up. They can often live very detached. They don't ask for help, don't practice vulnerability. Many of them can present themselves as though they don't need relationships. If it comes to the subject of attachment issues, this type of person can be the more avoidant one that avoids any connections, and they have hard walls. It takes a while for you to get in, but you feel like you have a chisel you got to get out and a hammer to really go after this. The second type is really a no boundaries at all kind of situation. There's very, very few, if any, boundaries going on. And this allows the analogy I'm going to use is the floodwaters just come crashing in and just run over everything. Recently, I live in North Carolina. We've seen the devastation of what floodwaters do and how they can just disrupt everything. Someone who doesn't have any boundaries, doesn't have a healthy setup. So like the Bible says, you become like a city broken down and without walls, where walls are meant for a protection, but it's also meant to establish a barrier, many other things, as I've already said. But a person who's not practicing any boundaries, they often have a hard time saying no. In fact, they often just don't say no. They overshare a lot, too much. They don't know how to take what they have and share it in sequence in time. They allow people to continually act disrespectfully towards them. They can often be too involved, too enmeshed in other people's lives. It can also be where other people have just too much involvement in and over every nook and cranny of your life. They often have a lot of drama surrounding them. They get used to the chaos. They don't know how to live any other way. But they carry a heavy, ungodly sense of responsibility in how they relate to other people's problems. Many times relating to other people's problems and getting lost in them is a way to distract themselves from dealing with their own lives. And they become oftentimes constant people pleasers. So where do you find yourself? In which ditch? Do you either find yourself neck deep in, or do you find yourself leaning towards, so that you can have some awareness to balance yourself out? Now, in this first broadcast, what I want to do is I want to share with you, why do you need this? Why is this so important? And I think you watching this far is showing that you want to have better boundaries in your life. But I want to bring some reminders of you, because sometimes why helps us in understanding why are we practicing this in the first place. So I want to get into a number of reasons why healthy boundaries are necessary. Number one is that it contributes to the health of the relationship, and here's how it does that. It provides an environment that allows people to grow together. It's like, okay, here's the time limitations, the energy limitations. We're going to respect each other, right? So in that environment, it gives us the best chances in our relationship to grow together. As you've heard from so many broadcasts of mine, mental and emotional health is built up through relational practice. You and I need to build and strengthen relationship health by learning how we relate to God, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to the world around us in more fruitful ways. And so the presence of boundaries gives us the best setup for that. Number 2 is that boundaries encourage, it sends a signal to everyone that we can have an opportunity to grow in a healthy way together. Now, people may not receive it. There are many times you'll establish boundaries and people will get upset. This is a part of life and a part of the journey. The goal of healthy living is not to get everyone to like you. The goal of healthy living is to live healthy. And so when someone practices a boundary, it sends a signal to everyone that I have value and respect for myself and also for you, which sometimes we don't always think of that. So it's a signal that this can move in a healthy direction. The third thing is that when we live in boundaries, it can teach us more about what true love is like. And one of the things that in our lack of boundaries, whether we're too rigid, too harsh, and we're looking for the rule and we're just big rule followers and we're harsh on people, or we just get run over, is we haven't understood the power of what love looks like. And boundaries help us to learn what true love looks like, because true love is not a free-for-all. True love is not guilt. True love is also not just being harsh to people, being judgmental, and not having relational grace. But I find in the core of love, and when it comes to boundaries, boundaries teach you to see yourself through the lens of love. In mental health journey, we see so many people don't have a sense of love and respect in how they relate to themselves. And many who struggle with boundaries, they neglect and they downright ignore themselves. They don't pay any attention. And so it's easier for people to walk all over them, and they become used to that. People can assume, Mark, you value compassion and grace. I appreciate it so much. People can mistake that because I value being loving so much that I can get pulled into everything you throw at me, or that I will just invest into anything that shows up. No. The more I grow in love, and what love actually looks like, the more my boundary patterns become healthier, where I'm not being a rigid wall of anger, so to speak, right? But it's also not a run over thing. I learn in wisdom, because really the growth journey is about growing in wisdom. And I really believe that when we grow in the love of God, it invites more wisdom into our life in what love looks like in a given situation. Relationship boundaries, number 4. They are a part of stewarding the life and energy of your heart. Folks, you can only do so much. You can only take in so much. I mean, we are living in an age where people have so much access through social media, through phones and texting, that it creates this expectation that you can get drained very, very easily. You only have so much time. You only have so much energy. A sign of a lack of boundaries in your life can be constant exhaustion, where there isn't an honoring of a limitation, that you only have so much time. You need to have boundaries at work, where you go, okay, this is the time. All right, that's it. I have that in my life where I go, okay, the day's over. Now I work in I don't have a boss over me, those kind of things. So I'm able to say, okay, this is it. But I have to have that internal one to go, day's over. Okay. This is where I stop for the day. And so I want to encourage you to value your energy and your time, specifically energy. When I talk about time, I'm really talking about giving you my energy, because if sometimes we focus on time management, I really focus on energy management. I look at my day and go, what am I giving my energy to? And what kind of energy investment is that? And I'm a big believer in stewarding that. Because sometimes we look at our day and our time and we just shove a bunch of things in. We're exhausted at the end of the day. Relationship boundaries teach us, no. Your time is precious. Your time and your energy is valuable. We want to put it towards things. The Bible says redeeming the time, taking God's redemptive work, which is such a beautiful phrase, that God is redemptive in everything. Some people get lost in lost time and lost energy and lost things, right? And we get stuck in the grieving pattern of that. Well, God's redemptive. And it's like we can now take back our ability to choose what we put our time and our energy into. And I want to empower you and encourage you in that. Number 5 is that boundaries help you get clarity on who and what you're invested in. I think you should look at everything you're involved in and go, is this something I really need to be involved in? To live more from vision. People without boundaries are often very unclear, foggy. It can even be more ADD-like in their lifestyle, all over the place, scattered, because they're not getting clarity on what they're saying yes to and what they're investing into. Because your yes, now your decision of yes then brings your actions towards that. And so I practice this on a regular basis. What and who am I going to say and decide to be invested in? And boundaries will actually help you to gain more clarity in your emotions, in your thoughts, in your mental health. People without boundaries, they are not only showing a lack of clarity and confusion, they have a distortion in how they see certain things like love, like grace, forgiveness. I've seen so many people who they don't have any boundaries in their relationships, and they go, oh, you just got to love people. It's a distortion of what love looks like. Oh, you just got to forgive and forget. Also, they think that when someone wrongs, you should just kind of keep in the same relationship and not go, If there's been true trust violated or a betrayal, those are opportunities where you can still love, you can still be forgiving, but a boundary has been set now. Now, people without boundaries, they often use these sayings as an excuse to stay in their codependent, enmeshed, dysfunctional, not wanting to rock the boat. I've even heard people who lack relational boundaries often think, if you encourage them, hey, I think you need to have a boundary in this area, they might say, well, no, I got to be forgiving. You see, they equate forgiving as just letting people continue to live how they live around you and allow that toxicity to just run over your life. That you're bitter, that you're resentful, or that you're not loving. And it's something that anyone with boundaries, at some point, somebody with boundaries has been accused of being unloving, when really boundaries are a demonstration of respect and love. Number 6 is that boundaries are going to help you to learn over time what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for. And for many of you in your journey, most of what you take responsibility for is not your responsibility. This is part of what we experienced when we weren't taught. We don't have any models, because you are not responsible for other people's choices, their sin patterns. You're not responsible to carry the full weight of a relationship. You're responsible for your decisions, your choices, the steps that you take in your life and your journey. But that gets really foggy. Now you become responsible for everything. Number 7 is boundaries help you learn you do not have to react and respond to everything that comes your way. Don't we feel that? Every text message, every phone call, every drama, everything that shows up, you got to do something about it, right? Now, those of you that are parents, of course, with your children, there is a different dynamic. You are responsible and shaping but you're also an example to your children too of boundaries, the ones that you have in your own life, because children respond so well to healthy boundaries. They really do. I see over and over again, whether it's discipline that I utilize, moments of needing to be firm, moments of setting boundary, my children respond so well to. In fact, I see peace come over them. I even see where they appreciate and they're grateful later. They may not be in the moment, it might be fussing. They'll come back later and they appreciate because they feel the love that brings into their life. It actually shows that I respect them. And so that's a big one to learn. Speaking of respect, number 8 is that boundaries help you to learn and practice respect. Respect for yourself and respect for other people. I can see right off the bat, if I establish a boundary with somebody and how they're communicating with me, it tells me a lot about a person, about how they react to that. Now, the good news is I have so many people I've interacted with that they actually respond well to a boundary that I set up, maybe in the interaction or maybe in a variety of ways. So I actually have a lot of great interactions, and it shows that people are valuing boundaries. And that's very, very encouraging. But there's certainly many who don't. And they'll often get angry, and this is where patterns of disrespect come about. Number 9 is that boundaries invite you into working through toxic guilt issues and people pleasing. And isn't that a big part of the healing journey? And a key that boundaries will bring about is no. It's not about serving guilt like that anymore, because many of our relationships have been formed and based on guilt. I have a whole series on toxic guilt you can look up. That's available, and you can go through each session and take advantage of that, because many of us need to learn. I have a series on people pleasing as well too that you can get into. So even in what I'm sharing here now, you can branch off into those as accompaniments to what I'm sharing here. But all of us, we're having to undo our relationship with guilt, because a lot of what we do is out of guilt. We chase guilt. We're compulsively chasing guilt, and it's not love. And we're trying to make people happy. And meanwhile, boundaries teach us to confront our people pleasing and our guilt feeding. That's going to be a big step in this process. Lastly, number 10, boundaries, they teach you to be a safe person for others. When I see someone who applies healthy boundaries, it gives me a sign. I think that could be a safe person. And it's not the sign, but it is a major one. People with healthy boundaries, they're safer for others, because how they live their life contributes to health and how they approach. Because if they're valuing that, they're going to value healthy relationships. They're more likely going to respond to people in a healthier way. And I'm going to make a strong statement. Those without boundaries, they're boundaryless. They are not only toxic for themselves, they're also unsafe for others. They can actually be toxic and unsafe for others. Now, at first, people without boundaries, they can get irritated that you don't give into their demands or their intense expectations. It's one of the common unhealthy reactions to boundaries. It's anger, a sense of outrage, and they can get irritated by that. Now, people without boundaries, they don't realize their life affects other people, that their poor choices, they're not taking responsibility for. All that stuff becomes a dump truck that now when they interact with you, they're just backing up that dump truck. And now it's wanting to invade and infect your life. They carry their toxic relational world now into your world. They may make a bad financial decision and expect you to just either help them, go along with it, or even support it. Or they make very toxic decisions, and they want you to live in such a way that is supporting and aligning in it. And they will say, if you're not doing that, you're not loving. They will keep toxic people in their life and expect you to just go along with it or even support it. This is where now you can get pulled into, if you don't have boundaries in your life, you get pulled into becoming an enabler in other people's dysfunctional journey. In addition, when someone doesn't have boundaries for their own life, they won't recognize having boundaries for anyone else or being respectful to anyone else. So they won't honor your life and your decisions. So, for example, you could have a common relationship. Maybe you're friends with somebody and you both know someone else and you're dating that person. Okay. And you break up. Okay. So whatever situation is, boyfriend or girlfriend, you break up. And now that friend has a party or get together and they invite the person you're broken up with to the party that you're invited to without a thought. It's just a simple example. Without a thought of, hey, this might be something that may not be respectful to this person. It's not about people pleasing. It's about being respectful that this may not be honoring to where they're at in their journey. See, people with safe boundaries, they're mindful of others in a healthy way. I hope this is making sense. I've even seen this too with like ex-spouses or things like that, where it's just boundaries are not honored. And when it gets confronted or talked about, they often kick back. I'm just trying to love people. I'm just trying to... Because lack of boundaries creates lack of order, confusion, it invites chaos, and it invites dysfunction to pour out into the lives of other people. This is why boundaries are so important, because I want to be a safe person, not just for myself and for my journey, but also for you. Which point did I bring out today that stuck out the most to you and where you are in your journey? If you could, let me know. If this video was helpful, click the like button and subscribe. You can also go over to markdejesus.com, where my website is chock full of resources, materials, books, and all kinds of, even a community, training courses, all kinds of stuff that you can take advantage of. I'm going to get into, in part 2, why are relationship boundaries so challenging? Because I like to get to the root and the heart of the battle to bring acknowledgement and awareness to the stuff we're working through that we need to be aware of as we process healthier steps. But Lord willing and the creek don't rise. This is your brother from another mother saying, I'll be back with more insights for your healing and freedom journey. But in the meantime, I'm out.